Victoria Rumble Room, a show that endeavors to deliver for Vancouver Island, British Columbia, Canada, the wide world, all the things that we hope you like to know about. We certainly want to learn about. And across town is my partner in crime, the man himself, the Croatian sensation, John Jurisic. And John, we've reached a new milestone on Victoria Rumble Room. A new milestone. Yeah.
Tell me more.
Yeah. 250,000 views. We've hit 250,000 views for our various offerings from this show since last April. How did that happen?
Well, I don't know, but it did. Clearly, whatever the hell we're doing here, someone's interested. No, really remarkable, Robin. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you to all our viewers. Clearly, we're talking about something that interests somebody. Hey, you know what interests me is how much movement I do. It's like, wow. Maybe that's getting the odd viewer.
I've mentioned you've got a big fan. There's a guy named Ed that I know that he's always talking about how your hand movement is something he finds almost hypnotic.
Well, maybe that's how we got a few of those views. Yeah. Anyway, a consistent theme, throughout all of these views has been this friggin' health crisis. Come on.
Yes.
Just lately, it's really hit everyone so hard. We were a little bit, expecting things to ease up before the holiday season. We had a scare in our family. There have been thousands of new cases, confusion, what to do. Places are closing. I think the gyms are going to have a revolt. Lots of young people are being impacted this time. The hospitals are stretched. Oh my gosh, the world's in crisis, and really representative of kind of where we're at now, this sort of, pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine, how to get ourselves out of this, is a world-class athlete, the best tennis player in the world, the idiot himself, Novak Djokovic. Right?
John, that was very eloquently expressed. But, Djokovic, there's no question he's one of the greatest athletes in the world right now. And he's a noted anti-vaxxer. And I'm sure the anti-vaxxers are celebrating his principled stance about refusing to get vaccinated and still insisting to play in all these tournaments. But he's just hit a roadblock in Australia where he has been kicked out of the Australian Open. He's had to go home, or he's at least had to go back to Europe. And his father, Novak Djokovic's father, was quoted as saying that attempts to assassinate the best athlete in the world have ended. Well, really, I think there's more accountability on his end. I think he threw the spanner in, and his reputation, Johnny, has taken a major hit. When he arrived to participate in the Australian Open, Djokovic lied on his visa entry papers about the fact that he actually had COVID a few months ago, and the fact he'd been meeting with people without masks. And he also was kind of talking about, I didn't really understand what that form said. Somebody wrote that out for me. And he all along has never tried to hide the fact that he's a big anti-vaxxer, and he is unvaccinated, he says, for undisclosed medical reasons. And, we hear about this also in the NFL. There are NFL stars that have refused to get vaccinated, and they are also the cause celeb of anti-vaxxers. But these people have a responsibility. They're making huge amounts of money. A lot of people idealize people who are at the very top echelon in sports, no matter what your sport of choice is. I think that comes with a responsibility. You go to Australia, which has been massively locked down for the last 2 years. I mean, what do you expect? So Djokovic now goes on to the French Open next. Who knows what will happen? I suspect he will be allowed to play there, John, because he's a big draw. It's big money. They want to have those big dollars. Djokovic, I think, will thumb his nose at the system some more, but he didn't do it in Australia.
Robin, it's hard not to get exhausted with all this stuff. It's so painfully, objectively clear how to protect yourself from this virus. And yet so many folks are refusing to do that. I will never understand in my lifetime why that's happening. And on top of that, you add on the sort of the place of the world-class athlete. What kind of reputation, their actions impact so many people. They influence what people are going to do, but they need to be prepared to face the consequences of those actions. And, talking about anti-vaxxers in Canada, there are these these people.
Are trying to go to the hospitals. They're trying to get their work done. They're trying to go there and do a hard job and save lives.
Right.
And there are anti-vaxxers who are actually trying to block their way and are harassing them.
Look at me. I can barely speak. I'm so annoyed with all of this.
Fregando al mundo, si tú antivacunas eres un imbécil, ponte el cubreboca. Ahí te voy.
However, good for the federal government to pass new laws, new rules, new regulations to clamp down on these threats. President of the Canadian Medical Association certainly agrees with this move.
When we look to the protests that were happening outside of hospitals, these were not peaceful protests. These were people getting in the face of patients, vulnerable patients trying to access care, yelling and spitting on them, following healthcare professionals to their cars, vandalizing their vehicles, people feeling threatened that people may be following them home. I've heard from many physicians that have received multiple death threats. One of my colleagues in the Yukon received 6 death threats in one day.
So that's from the Canadian Medical Association here in BC. Dr. Bonnie Henry, she's saying we got to be locked down some more. There's a lot of regulations staying in place. We need to move through this. Numbers have risen and risen. There's more people in hospital. We've had people dying. It's a real mess. And if you remain unvaccinated, you're taking a terrible chance. Get vaccinated. It's not that difficult. You're not going to hurt yourself. You're going to help a lot of people in our community. In the middle of this, we have the BC public schools now going back, young people getting vaccinated. Of course, that's going on all the time, but there's a risk remaining in our schools. We don't know how big the risk is. We know that some schools have had some problems in other parts of the province. Some schools have had some minor outbreaks. We don't know where this is all going. BC's Education Minister, Jennifer Whiteside, had this to say about immediate steps that schools are taking.
Implementing strategies to prevent crowding during class transition times, such as staggering start and stop times or recess times, break times. Holding school gatherings and events such as assemblies in a virtual format.
So, Robin, I know many folks puzzle, how can John be a grandfather? He looks so young. You know what? I've got 4 kids. One of them is in right. One of them is in school, and I worry. I worry about this. I can't believe it. I can't believe that is something that I got to worry about in 2022. Let's hope the schools stay safe. However, moving on, because there are other issues besides this. We're in the middle of an inflationary spike. What might be an interest rate spike, certainly a spike in housing prices. The price on a home in Vancouver has gone up 35%. Vancouver Island has gone up 35% in the last year. Now we hear interest rates may be on their way up, and to deal with rampant inflation, the worst since '82. So what's down the road for our economy, Robin? What do you think?
Well, what I think is we should get a special guest on here now to talk about this for a few moments' time, and that would be Rod Mahrt. And Rod is a senior portfolio manager and partner with Wellington-Altus managing, this is the company, they manage across Canada $20 billion in investments across Canada. So I think Rod knows a thing or two about this subject, so let's zoom him in. Now joining us in the Victoria Rumble Room for the first time from Wellington-Altus is Rod Mahrt, recently named to the top 100 investment advisors in the country by the Globe and Mail, and a good friend of mine. And Rod, it's so great to have you back. I think it's been, I don't know how many years it's been since we used to do these sorts of investment things on radio and television together. So fantastic to have you back.
Yeah, I think it's been that long since I've actually done it on radio or television. So this is all new to me. So looking forward to it.
Well, great to have you on Zoom. And Rod, inflation has been sharply climbing. And there's every indication that south of the border, there's going to be a hike in interest rates. The Fed is talking about up to 3 hikes in interest rates for 2022. What does this mean? And what are you hearing? What does this do to the global economy?
Well, it's funny. I think certainly I think all your listeners today want to understand one thing, and that's there's no doubt that interest rates are going to go up both in Canada and the US this year. So if you've been hoping that that wasn't going to happen, forget about it. It is going to happen. The real question I think we should be asking ourselves today, well, there's two. First of all, how did we get here? And then where we're going. So how we got here, basically, when we had COVID break out, the economy went into a global shutdown, and we had the central bankers, so the Federal Reserve in the US, the Bank of Canada, all the central banks in the world did something they did not do during the global financial crisis of 2008, and that is they quickly lowered rates. They went down almost to 0% in the US and Canada. And then they began to buy back securities to pump money into the system, not necessarily printing money and putting it in the economy, but making credit available. So that's the first thing. That's called monetary policy. At the same time, we had the governments themselves. In the US, you had Trump's administration and then later Biden. In Canada, we had Trudeau do his, and they were not printing money, but they were creating programs to push money into the system. So what you had there was like lighting the fuse on a rocket ship, and you had monetary policy and fiscal policy coming together and just providing this huge propelling economic activity. So the net result of all that is the economies start to thrive and things move in a low interest rate environment. All of a sudden now we're starting to hear the words inflation, and we're starting to see the costs of goods and services. Our gas is going up, our bread is going up, coffee is going up. So let's just begin by saying, as I mentioned initially, everyone should lock themselves into the simple fact that this is a reality. Rates are going up in Canada. In fact, rates may go up next week, as early as next week in Canada. I put the odds right now that at roughly 75%, that rates will probably go up maybe 1/4% in Canada. And then at the next Fed meeting in March, I think in February, you'll see interest rates go up in the US. Now, what is interesting is when you look at Canada versus the US has inflation right now of 7%. Canada's inflation number, I think, is around 4.3, somewhere around there. So Canada doesn't, we're in a different economic situation than the Americans. So here's the real challenge. If you're a central banker, how much do you raise interest rates here? And here's the real challenge, the art form of it. If they raise rates too much, too fast, too soon, then what's going to happen is they're going to push the economy in North America into a recession. Mm-hmm. If they don't do enough, then inflation is going to continue to expand. Yeah. And with that comes, on each side of that equation, there's pros and cons.
So Rod, it's kind of a bit of old school week here, or old school day. You and I go back a ways. I was a stockbroker with Wood Gundy in the 80s. Were you and I working together at that time, or?
I think I just joined, I moved from a firm called Pemberton Securities in 85, 86 to Wood Gundy, which is where you were. Yeah. I moved to Wood Gundy in March of 1987. So that shows how old I am.
Oh, gosh.
Wow. And then left Wood Gundy about 3 years ago to go to Wellington. Yeah. So,
well, you and I both survived what was one of the first real bad crashes since the 30s. Of course, then we had our next one in 07. And I tell you, if rates go up too high now, I think there could be a problem. I realize you're an investment advisor. Let's see, I'd like to hear your advice with regard to alignment with housing. Housing prices have gone through the roof. People are going, is there going to be a crash? Is it clearly, interest rates are going to impact that industry. What is your opinion for those sitting going, should I get a mortgage? Should I lock into a mortgage?
Should I even get in the market?
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, the assessments were up between 25% and even higher in some cases. Let's just dial that back a bit and, unpack it. So One of the things I would simply say about housing, there's two drivers. One is supply and demand. And one could certainly argue right now that in a low interest rate environment, people were encouraged to go out and buy, real assets, which is real estate. And that certainly led to the fact that housing prices are going up. But the second factor is scarcity. When there's not enough houses being built and the demand is there, that's going to cause housing prices to go up. And I'd say we've got a combination of both those things playing out in the market right now. I'm not a real estate expert, but I do invest in global real estate around the world. So I do try to keep track of that sort of stuff. But to me, it's really a supply and demand issue with regard to that. Now, what is, to drill down and answer your question a little further, the challenge here is, okay, rates are going up. So how much? So right now, the projection would be, if you look at some of the US investment banks, that interest rates will be taken up maybe 3 times this year. Each time would be roughly maybe 1/4%. So 3 times. Goldman Sachs came out about a week ago and said they feel that rates will go up in the US about 4 times. Now, remember, their inflation is at 7% versus where Canada is. So they've got to do a little bit more action in that area than we do. But our argument, my partner, Alex, and I, we view that we think interest rates will probably only go up about 2 times this year, maybe 3 at the most, mainly because of COVID and supply chain weakness. Because right now, as I said, your coffee's going up, a basket of groceries is going up. Part of that is some demand and supply. And of course, if there's supply chain issues on top of that, it makes it, it exacerbates the problem.
Wow. Rod and I go back, I mentioned we do, back in the Gundy days of the 80s. I have anxiety that where this year is going to be a tough one because I think interest rates are going to go up. How does that affect housing and housing prices? Is that not on everyone's mind as well? Sure enough. Yeah, we're going to be joined now by Mike Kozakowski, the CEO of Citified. Let's zoom him in and get some answers. Well, welcome back to the Victoria Rumble Room, Mike, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well.
Yes.
2022. I just made probably my 20th mistake writing 2021 as a year.
All right.
A serious problem with that. It'll take me a month more, I believe.
Hey, listen, it's a pretty happy time for folks that are owning property, selling property. Prices have gone up as much as 35% this past year. Are you kidding? What do you think? When do you think this spike is going to level off?
Well,
$1 million question, bazillion-dollar question.
Yeah. I took a look at realtor.ca before our show, this morning's show, and there's nothing to buy. So when there's nothing to buy, the seller dictates the price. And it's not just Victoria, it's the entire island from the southern tip to the northern tip. If you want to get into the single family dwelling market, you're looking at $1 million plus. On average, there's a few properties that you can still buy for under $1 million in the capital region, believe it or not. And they're not all teardowns. But if you have a larger family, or if you have needs, such as being closer to the city center, or you have a desire for alternative transportation options to get yourself to work or school, or your family back and forth from their commitments on a daily basis, then you're really looking at an extremely expensive housing market.
There was a report just out recently that showed the huge demand from people from the Lower Mainland to come to the island, and then other parts of Canada to come to the island. And thousands of people wanting to get over here and are willing to pay top dollar. I think there had been a perception that we were feeling the same pressure here that they'd felt for some time in Vancouver, with all the offshore money coming from Hong Kong and other parts of Asia, people moving in from other parts of the world. But really, I think, for the most part, from what I'm reading, it's a made-in-home problem. It's a Canadian problem. And we just had Rod Mahrt on just a few moments ago talking about interest rates. He says there's going to be probably 3 interest rate hikes this year. They may be small, but that may be significant when you're talking about the size of mortgages we're discussing as this market keeps going up. What are your feelings about mortgages, and are the interest rates going up? Is that going to level things off? Could that make a big difference?
we spent the last 3 years having people qualify for mortgage rates that are unlikely to be achieved even over longer term mortgages from today. I mean, when I got my mortgage, I had to qualify under a mortgage that is significantly higher than any economist will tell you we're going to hit over the next 5 years, reasonably speaking. So there's some movement there, but in the near term, I just don't think that rising rates, at least not this year, are going to have any kind of meaningful impact. It's already built into the system.
Yeah. So just Robin sort of alluded to this. I'd just like to dig a little deeper. I think COVID has stopped some travel fluidity. We've had less ability for people to move around the world. What is your data showing as to who are buying some of these housing? Is there a chunk of people? Clearly, we had a lot of folks from Asia buying houses in British Columbia. Is that changed? Where are we at now?
In terms of the data that's collected, there is a component that is difficult to circle back to the actual purchaser, but we're fairly confident in the data that we do have that captures who the individuals are, or rather where they come from. 70% of the buyers in Greater Victoria are local buyers, or just under 70%. So you've got 30% that are impacting the market from other jurisdictions, predominantly from other jurisdictions in Canada. The largest of them is the Greater Vancouver market. The second largest market is British Columbia, followed by the Alberta market. And then it's a breakdown across the country and then from the United States. So foreign buyers are actually, including the United States, are actually a very, very small low single digit percentage of the share. Where the issue comes in is that 30% of buyers, they're not selling their residents back into the market. So they're absorbing what's already in the Victoria market without adding supply. And that's causing some of that pressure. In fact, a lot of that pressure.
Could we talk about supply a little bit? Could we talk about the hot market and the building that we're seeing go on? I mean, there's so much happening in the Western communities. We just saw, Langford was named the most resilient community in British Columbia by BC Business Magazine. So that tells you something, because Langford's exploding, West Shore is exploding, so much construction going on around the city. So if all this building's going on, why are we so far behind in terms of inventory that this is still a problem?
Yeah. We're trying to build in the span of a decade what we should have been building over the span of 4. And that's the problem. And what we're building now can't even keep up with the population growth. Statistics Canada, they just assessed the latest estimates for the capital region. And we came out at just under 6,000 new people between 2020 and 2021. Our rental housing supply hit approximately 1,300 units. And let's say we'll double that in terms of new housing and condos that were also built in 2021. So if you're looking at the supply of new housing, it's barely keeping up with population growth as is. Now we've got all that demand that is already baked into the system. And we also have societal changes that are seeing more and more people living alone in dwellings that 20 years ago would have had 1.1 or 1.2 people per dwelling. And that's a challenge as well. Where we go from here, I don't know. But as I've been saying over the last several years, and we mentioned this the last time that we chatted, was that the reality is that the majority of the Capital Regional District is forbidden from being developed on. And our urban containment boundary has been tapped. I mean, we're now tapped. So the only way for real estate prices to navigate the current reality is this way. We're seeing that now. It's basic fundamental economics at this point.
So Mike, that lends itself well into my question, my observation. Really, we have 4 core areas of it could be 4 municipalities within our actual 13. That being the Peninsula, Saanich, downtown, and the West Shore. Okay, and there's Oak Bay and somewhere in there. And so the characters of these areas have been pretty well defined, over last 30 years. If I said Peninsula to you, you'd go farmland. West Shore, however, is changing. Even folks that have not gone there for 6 months go and they go, whoa, what? Can you tell us kind of the vibe out there as to are developers or folks that are planning to build these new houses? Are they sensing these regions really changing in character? Is Victoria the quaint little horse-drawn area, or is it now, 30-story buildings of rentals? What's the vibe out there?
Mhm. Developers tend to respond to public sentiment. They can't get projects approved unless the public is on board. So I guess a large part of the industry tries to sense what is possible, and you're always going to try and maximize what is possible, because from the time that you buy the property to the time that you're developing, the markets can change so much and the costs can change so much that you're constantly having to plan 5 years into the future. At every step that you take, you're looking 5 years into the future. So the 30-story building question, that's the inevitable, and part of that is because our urban containment boundary is so small. We literally have only a fraction of land available for development that a place like Calgary would have, or Edmonton, or any of the other Canadian cities that tend to have much more reasonable real estate prices. And the inevitability of coming up against this urban containment boundary limit is that you're going to now have to maximize the density on each piece of land. And we see Victoria pursuing the missing middle housing zoning changes. Langford is pursuing towers upwards of 30 stories. 15 years ago, none of this was conceivable. There was no need for it.
Yeah.
But the development industry could see it coming from a long ways out. But at that point, it was difficult to have the conversation, because you would spend more time trying to prove your vision of the future than you would getting your projects approved. So even though we knew what was coming for the last 2 decades or so, the focus wasn't just getting built whatever could be built.
On the other hand, we're always wrestling in this city about quality of life. In fact, that's the big thing on Vancouver Island in general, quality of life versus a comfortable place to live. We just had the mayor of Saanich on a little while ago talking about the fact that it's so important that we have Cedar Hill Golf Course in the middle of the city and all those amenities. I don't think I hear a big groundswell of people saying, let's get rid of the agricultural land reserve. People love having the farms. They love having agricultural land and parkland and all these things around us. And to see that all covered in houses and buildings, I think would be abhorrent to a lot of British Columbians, a lot of Victorians. So I guess you have to accept, if you want it to be the way it's been and just maintain all that green space, it's going to cost you more to live here.
Yeah, and it will also mean that the buildings are going to take a very different form than what we're used to. A lot of Victorians 30% of newcomers buying housing, or 30% of people buying housing are newcomers, and they're coming from all sorts of places, big cities, some very big cities, and they're in a way escaping those big cities. They're making a conscious choice to go somewhere smaller, and we tend to see that. People don't, if they have a choice, generally speaking, and they're over the age of 35, let's say 40, generally speaking, they will choose a smaller place because it's more manageable, it's more understandable. You can fit in a little bit easier. You can understand the cogs and where they fit into the bigger picture. Whereas when you move into a larger city and you're in your midlife, it's almost as though you have to redefine so much about who you are and how you would fit into this bigger city. Now, I'm not saying that that's the case for everybody, but generally speaking, people from Vancouver looking to move are not going to be moving to Toronto. They're going to be looking to Victoria or Kelowna. And I also want to show you this. Now, this is a tsunami map. We just got a tsunami warning, but I felt that this is a very important image to show. Okay, look at the cities in the capital region. You see where the text is.
Yeah.
This whole area right there, that's all Capital Regional District.
Yeah.
There's nobody living there.
Yeah. And that's out your way, right? Out Sooke way.
Kilometers, hundreds of square kilometers of land that has been logged and logged and logged again, that is now cut off from the ability to add more housing. And the question that I have is, if people can live in those communities that don't have to be downtown or in Langford or even do the daily commute, but they're living where they are because they have no other opportunities to move beyond their communities, why can't more people be living out that way? who don't need to commute every single day to downtown Victoria.
Yeah.
So land is not a problem. And if I were to show you a map of Vancouver Island and the density points on Vancouver Island, you would be shocked. From space, you can't even see where the people live. It's such a vast island that we live on.
Fascinating to hear from Mike and to get his take on what's happening with housing, both in Greater Victoria, Vancouver Island, let's face it, the whole province. And it's a big issue, and we're going to be keeping a close eye on this thing for quite a while. But, you know, we're going to be doing something completely different next week, a real change of pace for this show. And it's going to be talking about Czech television. Czech television, which I don't know if you're familiar with Czech TV's history, but it was a number of years ago now. They almost faced closure. They were being sold and they were going to close their doors. And then in the 11th hour, MP Gary Lund stepped forward with some federal help to bridge them over some money. 3 major shareholders came forward and said, we will buy this station. And then the employees stepped in and said, we will buy shares in this company as well. So Czech TV lived to fight another day. But then you wonder, how does a TV station survive in an atmosphere where we have all this internet, we have all these specialty channels? So many people are locked in on their phones, on their iPads, on their computers, watching Zoom, hopefully, watching this show. How does Czech TV stay vibrant with that? Well, we're going to be talking to Czech TV's general manager, Rob Germain, somebody I've known for a very long time, about the survival of television and its future and the future of media in this media age. So lots of good stuff to bite into. Pretty excited, especially as a former Czech TV reporter myself.
Exactly right. I mean, Czech TV reporter, that's when I first met you. I first saw you. And all these years later, the media landscape has changed dramatically. I mean, here we are, Robin, 250,000 viewers for the Victoria Rumble Room. Who would have thought we're part of the media landscape? We didn't plan on that happening. I cannot wait to hear from Rob and his thoughts about media and all of these different parts that make up the way people watch the news and learn about the issues. So, okay. So we hit 250,000. Is it M or is it K? Well, that'll be a debate. Send in your comments. 250 M/K, 1,000 viewers. Okay. As you can see around us now, you can see how you can join us. We have a Facebook page. We have a Twitter page. We have a LinkedIn site. We have a website. We have all kinds of things. We're everywhere. And that's how things have got to be these days in this current state of the media landscape. Subscribe to us, follow us. And again, once again, I'm your pal from my Saanich lair, the Croatian sensation, the mayor of Upper Tulip Avenue, Johnny Jurisic. Guess what? I don't cheat and I don't win in tennis.
Well, Johnny, but you're still an amazing athlete. If only people could have seen you in water polo. I'm Robin Adair, and rumble on!